I've been airbrushing over 30 years, and I would like to share some tips and techniques that I've picked up along the way that will cut your learning time in half. It's a lot like learning to ride a bicycle. It looks a little difficult at first, but once you get on and start riding, it's really very easy and a whole lot of fun. Airbrushing is fun and easy to learn, but watch out, it can become very addicting. Once you discover the proper tools and the right techniques, you can turn a hobby into a serious, full-time career.
The airbrush actually dates back to prehistoric times, when the caveman would blow berry juice through a hollow reed or bone, and using his hand as a stencil or mask, created images on cave walls. Later, a more sophisticated version, still using the lungs as an air source, was known as a venturi straw. By blowing into the L-shaped straw, whose siphon tube was placed into a container of paint, the artist could atomize the paint and direct it towards a surface with greater precision. Today, air compressors provide the air source, and the airbrush replaces the straw. This allows greater flexibility and control, which results in images ranging from photorealism to abstract expression. The single-action airbrush is simple to use. It has a minimal number of parts and requires little maintenance. You can purchase this type of brush for as little as $15 or $20. Most single-action brushes are suction-feed guns, meaning the paint source is being pulled into the airstream from the bottom of the gun. The finger lever only controls the on-off action of the air. The rolling action of the fluid nozzle controls the amount of paint flow into the airstream. This type of brush is ideal for covering large surface areas. The double-action airbrush is available in gravity feed, side feed, and suction feed. With a gravity feed type brush, the paint falls into the airstream from a small reservoir on top of the airbrush. This type of brush requires low air pressure and is used primarily by illustrators and cake decorators that run low viscosity colors. A side feed airbrush has a reservoir on the side of the brush that can be tilted so you can spray the airbrush from any angle while still using low pressure. Because of the low pressure required, gravity feed and side feed type brushes are used for fine detail work. The low pressure creates less overspray, enabling exact control of delicate work. A double-action suction feed type brush allows for quick color change, which makes this type of brush ideal for production work. An artist who uses the airbrush for commercial work, such as textile painting or large murals, or who must work at a relatively fast pace, will want this type of airbrush. All double-action airbrushes are controlled by the double action of the finger lever, which regulates airflow as well as paint flow. A variety of air sources are available for painting. The least expensive, but also least economical, is canned air. Available in most art and hobby stores, canned air comes with a small regulator and allows limited spraying time. It is very portable, but has limited applications. CO2 is available from most commercial welding suppliers. This is a very quiet source of air, making it ideal for illustrators working together in an office setting. A diaphragm compressor has an electric motor that runs continuously. These are generally used for applications requiring up to 35 psi. When using a diaphragm compressor, you must use a moisture trap to remove water from the compressed air. You should install this trap at least 2 feet above the compressor. To prevent pulsating, a 10-foot air line should be used between the compressor and the moisture trap. A silent air compressor is the choice of professionals. It offers quiet operation, portability, and multiple air pressures. A reserve tank eliminates pulsating and allows the motor to rest between cycles. The most important component for any airbrush artist is color, the paint itself. Great color is essential for the best results. Airbrush paint should flow easily and have consistent color quality. Washability for textiles and adhesion for hard surfaces are primary concerns. These two factors help determine the overall quality of your work. Over 30 years of research and development has been put into the Createx brand of airbrush paint. Createx is the #1 choice of professionals and hobbyists. It's available at most art supply stores throughout the world, and Createx offers a broad spectrum of transparent, opaque, fluorescent, pearlescent, iridescent, and chameleon colors to satisfy every need.
Last year we painted over 60,000 t-shirts. Not one was returned due to paint failure. Under normal washing conditions, Createx paint will outlast the fabric itself.
Depending on your preference for working, whether standing or sitting, you'll need some type of easel to hold your work. Most artists prefer to work on an incline for comfort. The paint station or palette is usually located directly below the working surface. It's a good idea to have a secure place to hang the airbrush when not in use. A simple hanger is provided with most airbrushes. An airbrush hose is needed to connect the airbrush to the air supply. The air supply should be placed on the floor out of the way. If an extension cord is needed to power the compressor, be sure to use a heavy-duty extension cord to avoid damage to the compressor. It's best to work close to a dedicated electrical outlet whenever possible. A 2-foot box fan with an air conditioner filter taped to the back is recommended to capture the overspray away from the artist. Since Createx paints are water-based, there are no harmful vapors to breathe. Regardless of the air supply you choose, the basic operation of an airbrush is fairly simple. For suction feed brushes, an adapter is placed on the paint bottle. The bottle is then slipped onto the draw tube and held in place by friction. For gravity feed brushes, the paint is loaded in the reservoir with an eyedropper. Side feed brushes use either a bottle or a dedicated reservoir, depending on the specific brand of brush. With single-action airbrushes, airflow is controlled with the finger lever, while paint flow is controlled with a rotating fluid nozzle. Double-action airbrushes utilize the finger lever to control both the paint flow as well as the airflow.
As you practice the basic techniques, your confidence will grow. Like almost anything else, riding a bike, for example, practice makes perfect. The fear factor is conquered with a little practical experience. Remember, stay loose, don't tense up, and just spray paint to begin with. Don't try to create a masterpiece on the first try.
All airbrush creations involve one of two methods, or a combination of the two. First, painting freehand requires some artistic background, as well as good control of the airbrush itself. Whereas stencil techniques control where the paint goes by either filling in or blocking out areas to be painted. Stencils are used as either negative or positive. A negative stencil is sprayed through cutout shapes, while a positive stencil is sprayed around a contour shape. Let's take a minute to talk about overspray. Generally speaking, overspray is your enemy. Overspray is paint that reaches an unwanted area of your work, causing a fog-type appearance. To control overspray, most artists hold the airbrush so that it points to the inside of the area being sprayed. When creating detail lines, The brush should be held straight into the surface at close proximity, not at an angle. This prevents the stream from being deflected and creating overspray. When working on anything other than a flat surface, be aware that protruding edges such as t-shirt sleeves or raised portions of the work will attract overspray or catch it almost like a magnet. Protruding edges should be masked off or otherwise protected from overspray. Many objects can be used as a stencil to create an image. A simple leaf, lace from a fabric store, a basic cutout shape. The best stencil material is Mylar, available in most art supply stores. However, Pellon, wax paper, or simple poster board can be just as effective. Choose an image from just about any source, magazines, postcards, or even something drawn by hand. The image is traced and then cut out, either positive or negative. Apply the stencil to the surface with a light tack spray adhesive. This prevents underspray and keeps the edges clean. The stencil can be rolled tight or flat with a simple roller. Color is applied either inside or outside the stencil to create the image. The stencil is then removed, taking care not to smear any wet paint from the stencil or the work itself. Multiple stencils can be used to create different effects. Freehand work combined with stencil technique is the most commonly used method of applying paint with an airbrush. This way you can create a clean mechanical image over a soft, realistic background. Start by painting dots. This helps develop your line control. All lines are moving dots. The width of the line is determined by the distance your brush is from the painting surface. The closer your tip is to the surface, the volume of paint needed is decreased. The further you move out, the more the paint flow needs to increase. Freehand airbrush painting is created from variations of a standard stroke or lick known as the dagger stroke. A dagger stroke is a moving line while adjusting distance and paint flow simultaneously. It's also known as the rat tail, the flare stroke, or the saber stroke, as well as many other names. In this video, we'll refer to it many times as the dagger stroke, or a line that goes from thick to thin, or thin to thick. To create this stroke using a double-action airbrush, begin 3 to 4 inches away from the surface. Start the airflow and pull back 2/3 for paint flow. Immediately move the airbrush toward the surface in a linear motion while pushing the finger lever forward, cutting down the paint flow. The line should gradually diminish to a point. If you view this stroke from the side, you can see this as a circular motion. Observe how the paint is flowing at the top of the stroke and off at the bottom of the stroke. Practice this stroke until it becomes almost natural, because all other strokes are simply a variation of this movement. A sweeping double dagger stroke is an example of an exaggerated dagger stroke used to create clouds. The jig-jag is another variation of the dagger stroke to create texture or depth. There are hundreds of variations on this most basic of strokes. Thus, the need for practice is essential.
Now that you know the basics of airbrushing, it's a good idea to study some color technique. There are many good books and videos available. Some colors work well together and complement each other. Some combinations of color produce muddy results and don't mix well at all. For the aspiring airbrush artist, a basic understanding of color theory is a building block to success.
Cleaning and maintaining your airbrush is not a complicated procedure. However, it is very important. When it's time to change colors, the airbrush should be flushed briefly with airbrush cleaner. Createx offers the absolute finest airbrush cleaner for this purpose. It's available wherever Createx airbrush colors are sold. Also, extra bottle adapters from Createx are a good investment for the artist who uses multiple colors often. Extra adapters enable the artist to change colors quickly. At the end of each painting session, simply run Createx airbrush cleaner thoroughly through the airbrush. For dried paint on the outside of the brush, soaking the brush in Createx cleaner will make for easy cleanup. Never soak the airbrush in any solvent-based cleaners, because internal components include rubber O-rings and seals that will dissolve in petroleum-based products. It's also a good idea to clean the needle. Remove the back handle and loosen the needle chuck. Carefully, pull the needle from the back of the brush. Wipe the needle clean. Then remove the head and tip from the brush. Inspect for damage like cracks or flares. Replace any worn or damaged parts. Dried paint on the tip should only be cleaned with a round wooden toothpick to prevent damage. Before washing or wearing any textile creation, the colors must be heat set to the fabric. To do this at home, allow the colors to air dry thoroughly. Then turn the garment inside out and heat set with an iron for 2 minutes at the appropriate fabric setting. Keep the iron moving to prevent scorching or iron marks. Do not wash the garment for at least 3 days after heat setting. For leather and suede, simply heat set with a hot hair dryer.
Now you know the basics. If you apply these techniques with some practice and a little imagination, there's no limit to what you can create.